Russia in the late 19th century was a land of stark contrasts. The vast expanse of the Russian Empire was home to a diverse population, yet the social structure was rigid and deeply entrenched. At the top of the social pyramid stood the Tsar, an absolute monarch. Tsar Nicholas II, the last emperor of Russia, wielded unparalleled power and authority. His word was law, and his reign was marked by opulence and grandeur. He held immense power and wealth. The nobility, a privileged class, enjoyed a lavish lifestyle. These aristocrats lived in grand palaces and estates, surrounded by luxury and comfort. They were the elite, holding significant influence over the political and economic affairs of the empire. They owned vast estates and lived off the labor of peasants. These estates were often sprawling, with the nobility rarely engaging in the hard work themselves. Instead, they relied on the toil of the lower classes to maintain their wealth and status. In contrast, the peasantry formed the overwhelming majority of the population. These were the people who worked the land, producing the food and resources that sustained the empire. Their lives were a stark contrast to the opulence of the nobility. They toiled on the land, bound by tradition and poverty. The peasants' days were long and arduous, filled with backbreaking labor from dawn till dusk. Despite their hard work, they saw little reward, living in simple, often harsh conditions. Life for them was harsh, marked by long hours, meager earnings, and limited opportunities. Education and upward mobility were rare, and many peasants were trapped in a cycle of poverty that spanned generations. This vast chasm between the haves and have-nots created simmering resentment. The stark inequalities and the daily struggles of the peasantry fostered a growing sense of discontent and anger towards the ruling classes. It was a breeding ground for revolutionary ideas. The seeds of revolution were sown in this fertile ground of inequality and suffering, eventually leading to the upheavals that would change the course of Russian history forever. The 1897 census revealed the vast ethnic diversity of the Russian Empire. Over 100 different ethnic groups lived within its borders. Each group had its own language, customs, and traditions. Russians were the majority, but significant minorities like Ukrainians, Poles, and Jews played crucial roles in the empire's social and economic fabric. However, this diversity was not always celebrated. The Tsarist regime pursued a policy of Russification. They aimed to assimilate minority cultures into the dominant Russian identity. This policy often led to discrimination and resentment among minorities. It contributed to the growing unrest within the empire. While Western Europe underwent rapid industrialization, Russia remained largely agrarian. The feudal system, with its serfdom and landowning aristocracy, persisted well into the 19th century. This system hindered economic progress and perpetuated social inequality. Though some industrialization occurred, it was limited and heavily concentrated in a few urban centers. This uneven development created a stark divide between the rural peasantry and the emerging industrial working class. The slow pace of industrialization left Russia ill-equipped to compete with the West. This weakness further exposed the Tsarist regime's inadequacies. The burgeoning industries of Russia, while limited, attracted peasants from the countryside seeking better opportunities. However, the reality of urban life proved harsh for many. Factory workers faced appalling conditions, with long hours, low wages, and dangerous environments. The lack of adequate housing and sanitation led to widespread poverty and disease in urban slums. These deplorable conditions fueled worker discontent. They became increasingly receptive to radical ideas that promised a better future. Section 5. The Tsar and the Storm. Nicholas II's reign. Tsar Nicholas II, who ascended to the throne in 1894, inherited these mounting problems. His reign began with great promise, but the challenges he faced were immense and complex. He was a deeply conservative ruler who believed in the divine right of kings. This belief shaped his policies and his approach to governance, making him resistant to any form of change. he resisted any calls for reform, clinging to autocratic rule. His steadfast adherence to tradition and autocracy made him increasingly out of touch with the needs and desires of his people. His inability to address the growing social and economic issues, coupled with his repressive policies, further alienated the populace. The gap between the ruling class and the common people widened, leading to widespread discontent. The disastrous Russo-Japanese War of 1904 to 1905, a humiliating defeat for Russia, exposed the Tsarist regime's incompetence and weakness. This war not only drained the nation's resources, but also shattered the myth of the invincibility of the Russian Empire. This defeat further eroded public trust and fueled the flames of revolution. The loss in the war was a catalyst that intensified the already simmering unrest, setting the stage for the revolutionary movements that would soon follow. Section 6. A New Faith. The Rise of Marxism in Russia. Amidst the turmoil, a new ideology began to take root in Russia: Marxism. The early 20th century was a period of great social and economic upheaval. The Russian Empire was vast, but its people were suffering. Workers in the cities faced harsh conditions in factories, while peasants in the countryside struggled with poverty and land shortages. The existing social order seemed incapable of addressing these issues. Developed by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, Marxism offered a critique of capitalism. It was a revolutionary theory that sought to explain the inequalities and injustices of the capitalist system. Marx and Engels argued that the history of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggles. They believed that the working class, or proletariat, would eventually rise up against the bourgeoisie, the capitalist class that owned the means of production. It called for a classless society where workers controlled the means of production. This idea was revolutionary because it challenged the very foundations of the capitalist system. In a Marxist society, the wealth and resources would be distributed more equally, and everyone would have the opportunity to contribute to and benefit from the collective good. Marxist ideas resonated with the plight of Russian workers and intellectuals. The harsh realities of life under the Tsarist regime made Marxism an attractive alternative. Intellectuals and activists began to see it as a way to address the deep-seated issues of inequality and oppression in Russian society. They started to organize and spread these ideas among the working class. They saw it as a path to overthrow the Tsarist regime and create a more just society. The Tsarist regime was seen as corrupt and out of touch with the needs of the people. Marxism provided a framework for understanding their struggles and a vision for a better future. It inspired hope and a sense of purpose among those who felt marginalized and oppressed. Key figures like Vladimir Lenin and Leon Trotsky emerged, adapting Marxist theory to the Russian context and organizing revolutionary movements. They were charismatic leaders who could articulate the aspirations of the masses. Lenin, in particular, was a master strategist who understood the importance of seizing the moment. Trotsky, with his oratory skills, could inspire and mobilize large crowds. They provided a voice to the voiceless and a vision for a different future. Their leadership and ideas galvanized the revolutionary movement, setting the stage for the dramatic events that would soon unfold in Russia. The rise of Marxism in Russia was not just a political shift. It was a profound transformation of society, driven by the hopes and dreams of millions. Section 7. The gathering storm factors leading to the revolution. The convergence of these factors, stark social inequality, ethnic tensions, limited industrialization, worker discontent, Tsarist autocracy, and the rise of Marxism, created a highly volatile situation in Russia. The country was like a powder keg, primed for explosion. Each issue, interwoven with the others, contributed to a growing sense of dissatisfaction and a yearning for change. The stage was set for one of the most significant upheavals in human history. Section 8. Conclusion. The Eve of Revolution. By the early 20th century, Russia stood on the precipice of revolution. The Tsarist regime, clinging to outdated structures, seemed incapable of addressing the pressing needs of its people. Social unrest simmered, fueled by economic disparity, ethnic tensions, and the allure of radical ideologies. The Russian Empire, once a symbol of power and grandeur, was now a powder keg awaiting a spark. The year 1905 provided a taste of the impending revolution, a precursor to the cataclysmic events of 1917.